My name is Paul Jossin. I'm an assistant professor of literature here at Lawrence Technological University. I'm going to invite our panelists up to sit at the chairs here, and while I do that, I'll explain how the rest of the afternoon is going to go. But before I do that, how many people here have read Frankenstein? Yeah, are we going to talk about some Frankenstein today? Good, excellent. So, panelists, if you could join me. So, as you may know, Frankenstein turns 200 years old this year, and one of the things that has made this text persistently interesting is the fact that it is something that a number of different disciplines look at and analyze. And that was the idea behind this particular panel. So we have invited representatives of 3 different disciplines, literary studies, biomedical engineering, and philosophy, to talk with you a little bit about what the book means to them in their fields. So what we're going to do is have each of them give a brief opening statement about what the book means to them as representative of their disciplines. And then we're going to open up the floor to questions. They have some questions for one another, but I also would really like to hear questions that you might have for them, because as I think you'll see, this text is not just 200 years old. It's very, very present today. So our first panelist is Michael Scribner, Distinguished Professor of English at Wayne State University. He has published 4 monographs in 18th and 19th century English and European literature, including studies of Percy Shelley, cosmopolitanism, John Thule, and Jewish representations in the 19th century. He has edited and co-edited 3 books on English Romanticism, and among his numerous articles in scholarly journals is an article on academic jargon he co-authored in the 1990s with our own Dr. Louis Finkelman. I don't know if Louis was able to make it today, but he definitely was excited about this panel. He received a Keats Shelley Distinguished Scholar Award in 2006 and a Guggenheim Fellowship in 2007, and he is currently working on a study of Jewish influences on English Romanticism. Dr. Eric Meyer is an associate professor of biomedical engineering at LTU. His background is in mechanical engineering, but his primary research expertise is sports injury mechanism and prevention. Yes, guys like Eric read Frankenstein. He has also worked on understanding the arthritis disease process and using tissue engineering to prevent or repair damaged cartilage. Dr. Meyer directs the Experimental Biomechanics Laboratory here at LTU with the goal to advance biomechanics understanding and develop knowledge through translational research. And our final panelist, Daniel Sharda, joined LTU in 2015 after completing a PhD in philosophy at the SUNY Graduate Center in New York. His research is primarily in the philosophy of mind, philosophy of cognitive science, and philosophy of emotion. His current book project, the disciplinary jargon there. His current project is to apply empirical research on emotions and decision-making to problems in the field of moral psychology. So I've asked each of the panelists to present their sort of opening statements in that order. I'd ask you to hold your applause until the very end of our time together, and then we'll take it from there. So Dr. Scribner, if you can.
It's exciting to see all these people who have been reading Frankenstein. That's marvelous. Anyway, so what I'm addressing is, why does Frankenstein matter to me and my discipline today? Prior to the 1960s, university English departments read Frankenstein as a minor novel written by the wife of a major English Romantic poet, Percy Shelley. As popular culture, the novel has always had a presence, as it stimulated numerous plays shortly after its initial publication in 1818, and dozens of films in the 20th century. Literary critics now view the novel as a well-crafted novel with multiple narrators within nested narratives that interrogate one another. Moreover, the novel is richly intertextual, critically engaging a wide range of writers, including Rousseau and Milton, and ideas including Romanticism and utilitarianism. This complex novel, composed by a woman who was only 19, which is kind of stunning that she was only 19 when she wrote this, is now interpreted in a variety of ways. As pioneering science fiction exploring the anxieties about science and technology, as political allegory about the unintended consequences of the French Revolution, as a story about injustice and the effects of prejudice, and as an investigation of the gendering of scientific knowledge. The author of Frankenstein had a distinguished parentage, for she was the daughter of Mary Wollstonecraft, the foremost feminist writer of her generation, and of William Godwin, a political thinker whose philosophical anarchism influenced the English Romantic writers as well as the London Corresponding Society, the first working-class political association in England to promote democratic reforms. As a girl, she heard one of her father's friends, Samuel Coleridge, read The Rime of the Ancient Mariner in the family living room. And as an adult, she was a close friend of Lord Byron, the most famous poet not just in England, but also Europe and North America. Mary's own life story has now attracted attention from especially feminist scholars who note that she always signed her name as Mary W., or Wollstonecraft Shelley, honoring the mother who died giving her birth. In addition to her most famous book, Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley also wrote 6 other novels, as well as numerous short stories and essays. She also edited her husband's writing after his death at the age of 29. Although her literary achievements are considerable, even if we omit Frankenstein, that novel is her greatest success. Let me briefly discuss why literary scholars hold the novel in such high regard. By using multiple narrators who mirror and contest one another, Mary Shelley constructs a complex fiction that offers moral lessons while showing how difficult it is to draw moral conclusions. A popular reading of the novel depicts Victor Frankenstein as the archetypal mad scientist, whose zealous ambition and desire to rival God led him to create something monstrous and dangerous he could not control, thus following the examples of the Faustian story of the overreacher and the Jewish tale of the golem. The earliest dramatic version of the novel was accordingly entitled Presumption, pointing to the central issue of overreaching of what is proper for humanity. As the novel also connects Victor Frankenstein with symbols of the French Revolution, there is a discernible allegory of an idealistic revolution becoming excessively violent and impossible to control. Even if 19th century readers saw a cautionary narrative warning against tampering with nature and making radical changes in society, we now understand the novel to have a more ambiguous meaning. Shelley's Frankenstein also sympathetically represents the monster, whose first-person narrative rests in the center of the novel and whose language and story are heartbreakingly moving. Shelley represents the creature as an innocent who resorts to violence only after being abandoned by his creator and after repeated rejection from those he tries to love. The victim of social injustice who in turn victimizes others is a familiar tale of the 18th century, but Shelley innovatively places this tale with other stories of social injustice and prejudice. Innovatively, Justine Moritz is an innocent victim of judicial murder and class bias. The de Lacy family is exiled from France for the crime of supporting a Muslim Turk against Christian bigotry. Safi is an Arab Christian who rebels against the patriarchal oppression of her Muslim father. The creature also receives a literary education from canonical texts such as Paradise Lost, Plutarch's Lives, Goethe's Sorrows of Young Werther. If he learns from these stories that he is an outsider whom society will not accept, he also acquires the desire to belong to a loving family with a caring mate. Although the creature kills 3 characters, and although he is not human as we ordinarily understand that word, he's arguably the most human character in the novel, especially when he displays tragic self-awareness at the end of the novel. The creature seems to have a soul, although that is something that should not happen. Another meaningful aspect of the novel is the way it illustrates the specifically masculine features of an aggressively rationalistic intellect that seeks to penetrate nature's secrets and dispense with human mothers for the production of human life. The novel shows how the repression of biological mothering does not eliminate the need for love and nurture of the newly born. Rather, the repression merely heightens the creature's neediness for love. Walton and Victor both display a similar rationality that has a weak moral center. However, their assumptions and worldview are not idiosyncratic, but fully within the mainstream of European culture. Neither character is mad, but both act in ways that lead to death and suffering, suggesting that the domination of nature entails distorting human nature, thus linking scientific knowing with forms of violence. If Frankenstein is a mad scientist, the novel also suggests a madness within the project of scientific rationality, even if such rationality is nevertheless necessary for social progress. Although Mary Shelley's Frankenstein does not turn away from science, rational inquiry, and the project of modernity, it nevertheless depicts horrifying unintended consequences of idealistic projects and provides a troubling inquiry into the moral ambiguities of social political progress. The novel's formal quality of multiple intersecting narratives without an omniscient narrator points to the principles of dialogue, argument, and interpretation to navigate our way through the difficult problems with which science and technology present us.
Okay, thank you for that. Whoops, sorry. So I'll maybe go off script a little bit and skip to the end of my talk briefly. But before I do that, there's a couple BME students in the audience. For those who know me, know that my favorite engineer and innovator is Elon Musk. So he's part of our popular culture for some of the problems that he's facing as a manager or a businessman. But I think most people would agree that as an innovator, he's really on the cutting edge of technology and science. So I'm gonna use one of his quotes. If you go back a few hundred years, what we take for granted today would seem like magic. Being able to talk to people over long distances, transmit images, flying, and access vast amounts of data like an oracle. These are all things that would have been considered magic a few hundred years ago. So another kind of summary statement of what he's saying is a t-shirt slogan. It says, science, it's gotten us this far. You know, so there's a lot of benefits to science. But we don't realize that science is really a new invention. The method that we use today was invented in the scientific revolution, where we lay down a formal question or hypothesis, we do an experiment to collect data, and then we present that data and debate it with other experts in the field. This process transformed alchemy into chemistry, it transformed natural philosophy into physics, and led to the Enlightenment period, which gave us the novel Frankenstein. So the timing is really important there. Also, I want to reference that the title itself, Frankenstein, A Modern Prometheus, references other stories that come from ancient times. The Greek myth of Prometheus, where he stole fire from the gods to give humans that he created a special quality above all other creatures or animals. But more than just a myth, Frankenstein the novel is the first example of science fiction. So science fiction can be set apart from other genres where what it's trying to do is address the most advanced science and technology as it relates to societal issues. So it's raising these questions about the humanity of the most advanced science. This is different than a lot of the modern versions of Frankenstein, where they think of the horror, the goriness, or the fantasy aspects of you know, the movies that you might have seen recently. And there is this mad scientist figure that we reference throughout our culture. when new technology is invented, sometimes it gets labeled as Frankenstein science, like Franken foods are labeled for genetically modified organisms. GMO foods are sometimes labeled with that derogatory term. And a lot of physical or chemical inventions are, represented as going against God. They're blasphemy. But biological inventions are even worse. They're actually perversions in our society in many cases. So I want to go on. I want to talk about the historical examples of myth and science fiction and compare that to the modern examples that you're probably more familiar with. Like, how many people have seen the Avengers movies? Great, so maybe more than the Frankenstein. So later in the talk, we're gonna talk about artificial intelligence. I'm sure you've heard of that, right? What's the character in Avengers that embodies artificial intelligence? Ultron, all right. And what's he trying to do? He's trying to kill all the humans, right? Sort of like a Frankenstein monster that we've created. And who defeats Ultron? And what is the vision? He's sort of a cybernetic human, like a tissue engineered creature that's embodied with a certain soul quality, a superpower. So I think there's a lot of these kind of modern science fiction examples or fantasy examples that relate to the story and bring it into our time. And then my last point is, I haven't really talked about science or technology yet, and as a biomedical engineer, I'm probably skipping over what I should be talking about. There are a lot of different ways that we might be able to make creatures like this. Tissue engineering, genomics, modern biochemical medicines. We could create an elixir of life that cures disease indefinitely, stopping aging. Wouldn't that be great? Or maybe not, right? Because that's going to change our whole society if we invent something like that. There's brain-computer interfaces that we can implant to control our phones or interact with artificial intelligence, without a device. It's just built into our brain. So I have a lot of these kinds of examples that really started around the time the novel was written, where we had the first industrial revolution, and carry through to today, where, as President Mogul said, this is really the fourth industrial revolution. And it encompasses things like cloud computing, Internet of Things, wearable sensors or embedded sensors, artificial intelligence. So we're moving beyond the information age into a new realm of technology that is being created now. And so I guess I'll stop there, and maybe we can address some of my other information with some questions later on.
Hi. So as the philosopher on the panel, I thought that an interesting thing to do would be to choose two timeless philosophical themes that you can find in Frankenstein that also have a renewed or altered significance in light of recent technology. So the two themes that I'm bringing out is, first, the question of what is the scope of our moral community? Who do we need to care about? And the second question is, how is it that our moral character develops over time? How do we learn to be moral? So first, the moral community. So in Frankenstein, the creature tries desperately to join any community whatsoever. But he is it's completely hopeless because his horrible appearance is sufficient to get him rejected from everyone that he would like to receive any sort of connection with. This leads him into a desperate position where he gives up on any sort of connection with normal biological humans. His only last resort is to convince Dr. Frankenstein to create a creature just as horrific as himself, because only that kind of creature would be willing to form a community with him. So what is the new contemporary significance of this question? Well, so first of all, the abstract philosophy of this, there's many different answers that you can find in the literature as to who deserves to be part of our community. So one answer might be anyone who is capable of feeling pain deserves our consideration. So that would include animals, and that was the whole animal rights movement comes based on the idea that feeling pain is sufficient for deserving our care. Another criterion could be the ability to have rational thought. So if you can think rationally, then you deserve our consideration. Another consideration would be being a human being, being biologically identical to us. Well, depending on how you answer that initial question, there's going to be different implications for artificial intelligence. So if we create artificial intelligence that is capable of rational thought in a true sense, and maybe even is capable of feeling pain in a true sense, now these are very thorny philosophical questions, but does that mean that we are obligated to extend our concern to artificial intelligence? Would artificial intelligence have rights? Would artificial intelligence deserve freedom? Would they deserve to be protected from harm? Would it be wrong to turn them off or force them to do our work against their will? These are questions that we might have to face if we choose to create artificial intelligence that has those features, whatever those features are, that would grant them moral status. Now, there's a tricky social side, which is it's hard enough to get people to extend human rights to humans. It's harder still to get people to extend human rights to animals. And you can imagine it would be very hard to make the case publicly that we should extend human rights to an artificial intelligence. So if it turns out that we're morally obligated to do that, I'm not optimistic that we will actually do so. So that is a moral problem that might be in our future. So the other theme that I wanted to bring out is moral development. So Frankenstein, the monster, the creature, is created and immediately abandoned. So Dr. Frankenstein shows absolutely no regard for the well-being, let alone the moral development of the creature, and the creature is just left on his own, and actually initially does a remarkably good job of educating himself and developing a remarkable moral compass that is only destroyed when he is repeatedly rejected and abused by everyone around him, and eventually turns to murder. There's a lot of history of philosophy about how it is that our moral sense and our moral character develops. Due to shortness of time, I won't get into that history, but if you take Foundations of the American Experience at Lawrence Tech, you'll read Plato's account of that, you'll read Aristotle's account of that. So what is the new significance of that question? Well, when we create artificial intelligence and entrust that artificial intelligence with life and death decision making, then we have to decide in some way or other what the right answers are to moral questions. So the most salient example in my mind is self-driving cars. So whenever we drive, we are potentially going to be in extremely thorny moral dilemmas. So do you put your own life at risk to potentially save someone else from harm if you might need to swerve out of the way of someone who steps in front of you? Should you protect your own compared to strangers? So there's various moral dilemmas that in the philosophical literature have been debated for hundreds of years and probably will be debated as long as there is such a thing as philosophy. But in the laboratories of Google and, God forbid, Uber, they're actually hardwiring, or not hardwiring, they're coding the answers to these philosophical questions and putting them into the self-driving car software. So they can't avoid choosing what the moral policies will be of these cars. So that's an awful responsibility that they have, and that's inescapable. And it's something that, as a society, we have a lot of interest in what decisions they make. And the only thing that makes that a little bit less horrifying to me is that the alternative to that is human beings driving cars, and human beings are very bad at driving cars. So that's the only thing that makes me feel a little bit better about that, but there's plenty of other examples you can think of where artificial intelligence will in the future make moral decisions, and we are responsible for teaching our AI what decisions to ultimately make. Okay, thank you.
It's great. Let's thank these panelists. So there's such a wide range of issues that have been raised by these opening statements. Our panelists have some questions they would ask each other, but I think for the sake of time, it'd be good to just open the floor to any questions you may have. Maybe something that's not even related to anything they said, because we've all read the book and we all can talk about it. We do have a microphone that we're asking you to just raise your hand. I'll call on you. Dr. Zaloga will bring the microphone, and then that way we can get your question on record. So I open the floor for questions and responses.
This is good exercise.
So we just so that we're all on the same page, we just understand that the creature or the monster is like you said, not human, but in what ways would you identify the creature? Would you say that he is subhuman or superhuman?
This is a popular question. Well done, yeah.
It's a good question. I think his humanity comes across because of language, because there are a number of pages that he articulates, and we engage with him by means of language. And so it's his language that makes him human. Now, his appearance is another story. As soon as anyone sees him, all they see is scary difference. He's huge, he's ugly, he's not like us. But as far as his language goes, he speaks to us in a very powerful way. So I think what the novel is doing is presenting us as readers with a conflict, that on the outside, he does not seem human. By his language, his speech, he seems altogether human. So
I would actually say physically, I think he's superhuman. He's 8 feet tall or whatever. Wouldn't we all love to be 8 feet tall and as strong and as durable as he is? Maybe with modern implants and things, we can enable these kind of abilities in the future. But what I would say, compared to humans, I am superhuman because of this device in my pocket, right? I can communicate with anyone, anywhere, instantaneously, and I have artificial intelligence, Siri, enabled on my phone. This is a part of me right now. So I think we're all superheroes already, or supervillains. It's your choice.
I'll just chime in quickly. I think that in the moral sense, I think there's reason to think that he is exactly human, that he seems to suffer just the way ordinary people suffer. I mean, maybe a little bit less in the sense that he's so like robust and hardy that he can like physically survive more than we can, but emotionally he seems exactly as vulnerable as a human being would be, and he seems to have just the same desires and aspirations that a human being would. So in that respect, he is arguably neither superhuman nor subhuman, but exactly human.
So if I could follow up on the question that ties, kind of triangulates the question with what Eric and Michael both said, is the book causing us to rethink the very term of the very definition of what we mean by human? And I think Dan's response actually also is relevant here, because you're putting the creature firmly within the human camp, yeah, whereas Eric's saying it's not human, and Michael's saying the book is presenting us with a dilemma. So I'm just curious if you guys want to follow up, or anybody can kind of follow up on that too.
One thing that occurs to me is just this category of artificial intelligence, because the monster seems to have artificial intelligence in the sense that he's a product of his experience, he's a product of what he reads, but on the other hand, you know, aren't we all products of our experience? And that, so how are we that different from how the monster develops? I mean, because we have sense experience, we learn from them, we read, and also he learns by watching the DeLacy family. So, I mean, he's not in a real he's not a part of a family, but he's vicariously a part of it. So, I mean, so it's very similar. So, it seems to me that the boundary between artificial intelligence and what organic intelligence is not so absolute.
Other questions?
I had a question really that I wanted to for the young people to address. How many of you saw the movie Black Panther? By show of hands. Okay, let me ask you a question. Do you think the relationship between Black Panther and Eric Killmonger in some way resembles the relationship between Frankenstein and his creature? Yes or no? And if so, could somebody comment on that?
That's a great question. Let's get you a mic, and yeah, we'd love to hear these comments. Go ahead.
I don't have to stand, do I?
You do whatever you want.
I'm gonna sit. Okay, so I believe that the relationship is similar because Killmonger was originally a part of their tribe. I don't know what it's called, but they were originally a part of the tribe. And because of a decision that his father made, they kind of like abandoned him. And because he was abandoned at such a young age and all he knew was that his family abandoned him, they didn't want him, he resented them, he hated them, and then he came back to basically kill them. It's similar to Frankenstein because Victor rejected the creature, and because of that rejection, it turned into rage and hatred, which made him want to kill people who Victor loved, which resulted in William's and Elizabeth's death, and ultimately causing Justine to die because of Victor's actions. So yeah, I think it relates.
Other responses to that question? Can I ask a follow-up? Do we sympathize more with Killmonger or with the creature?
So I just wanted to add to what Kamaria said as well. Although there are some similarities, I feel as though the aspect of Victor creating life has a lot to do with it as well. So that's where my challenging what Kamaria said comes to play, because I think the whole creation of life thing has plays a major factor within although he was abandoned and rejected, this is what me talking about Black Panther, although he was abandoned and rejected and all of that, similarities, similar to Frankenstein, I think Victor creating Frankenstein, or the creature, let me correct myself, played a major factor. Let me stop repeating myself, so.
Good job.
To answer your question, we sympathize more with the creature because the way that Killmonger went about the rejection from the family, he didn't reach out. The creature reached out to Victor and wanted to build a companion so he could have somebody who has similarities and commonalities like him. So he tried to reach out first before he went on that rage and hatred and killing other people. But Killmonger, he had one goal, and that was to kill people and to hurt them. So he went about it the wrong way. Instead of just saying, your father killed mine, I was left behind, you guys didn't love me, you guys didn't accept me. He went about it, he just went straight, I'm gonna be your king, I'm gonna kill you guys, I'm gonna make you suffer, and everybody's gonna know about Wakanda. So that answers your second question.
Other questions? Oh, we'll come back to you.
So I wanted to ask, the title of the book is Frankenstein or the New Prometheus, right? But it seems to me like the novel is not so much a retelling of the Prometheus story as it is a retelling of the book of Genesis and God creating Adam and then providing Adam with a mate. And I wonder if Mary Shelley simply couldn't be that frank about what she was playing with, that it would be unacceptable in the 19th century to play with scripture, but it is acceptable to play with myth.
I would just say quickly that Prometheus is punished for creating man, or for stealing fire to create humans. And Zeus punishes him, I think, by tying him to the side of a mountain and having his liver be eaten out by an eagle every single day for eternity. So in that way, Dr. Frankenstein is punished for creating the monster. So there's probably a parallel there where I'm not sure that in Genesis, God is punished for creating humans. If anything, he punishes humans for seeking out the knowledge in the, eating the apple and that kind of thing. So that's just my thoughts, but I'm not really a moral expert, or a mythological expert.
Do you want to respond to that, Michael?
Okay. Mary Shelley approaches Genesis through Paradise Lost. I mean, the novel has Paradise Lost allusions all over the place, including right in the title page. And she's doing very tricky stuff with it, including making both Victor and the monster like Eve. In other words, Eve desires forbidden knowledge, so too does Victor, so too does the monster. And there's all kinds of playing with it. Sometimes the monster feels like Adam, other times he feels like Satan, and there's a lot of, one of the ways that the Romantics read Paradise Lost was they were sympathetic with the character Satan, and we find that in the novel as well. So there's all kinds of playing with Genesis in that way.
We had a student question, then we'll come to Melinda.
All right. I'm sorry I didn't get your name, but this is geared towards the philosopher. I'm so sorry. So my question is, well, you talked about morals and like decision making. So based on the decisions Dr. Frankenstein made, would you characterize him as having like godly characteristics, or would you characterize him as having like the characteristics of like Satan?
Well, that's an interesting question. I feel like the character of Frankenstein, I mean, his intelligence, I guess, is the thing that makes him seem godly, that he is able to go so far beyond his contemporaries. Like, he's able to achieve things that no one else in his time is able to do, which, is partly what drives the plot. The thing that I find distinctive about him as a character is not the idea that he's mad, but the idea that he is wildly irresponsible and almost childlike. Like, he reacts to every single development in the plot with zero foresight and zero consideration for what might come next. So it seems like he's just like this, he acts like a kind of a spoiled baby, and he just, so it doesn't even seem that he's evil so much as deeply, deeply irresponsible, which might be maybe more relevant as a critique of science than the idea of the mad scientist. Like, should we be worried about the mad scientist, or should we be worried about the scientist who is so self-absorbed that he or she doesn't even care enough to consider the consequences of their actions?
Sorry, can I reference a different movie? Has anybody seen the Alien series movie Prometheus? So this is like a modern version of the myth, right? And in that, the character Wayland actually gives a TED Talk in 2023. And in his TED Talk, he concludes by saying, I am God because I can create cybernetic robots that are equivalent to humans. So he's very proud of his ability to create this. So, you know, he's kind of taking the mad scientist, you know, godlike scientist to the extreme.
So this is just an observation, it's not a question. I just wonder if you had comments about the fact that Victor never names the monster, and the absence of a name seems to be part of his feeling that, you know, loneliness and the importance of naming in philosophy.
Yeah, so like, and I think it's connected to the fact that he creates the monster and instantaneously is revulsed and leaves his apartment and doesn't come back for, what is it, days? Which is the epitome of irresponsibility in that moment, to take no consideration for the consequences of his actions. So the fact that he doesn't name the monster, I guess it's connected to the other idea also of moral community. So the idea that if he named it, that would be acknowledging that it was a person that he was facing. And by not giving it a name, it's a really egregious illustration of a lack of consideration for the moral status of that creature.
And yet we named Siri and Alexa. Right. I mean, like, to bring it up to date, I think it's fascinating, too, how our interactions with AI involve the positing of a personality to something that actually does not have a personality, the way the creature did. I don't know if everyone's
and she'll tell you jokes or answer your jokes, too.
Right. She's tricking us into, like, making her part of the community. Actually, I was, there was a piece I heard once where they were talking about parents who speak to the Alexa or Siris in their lives without kind of moral care, modeling bad behavior for their children, right? So, like, you and I know Alexa's just a robot, and if I get mad because she doesn't bring up the right recipe, I could be like, Alexa, and start raging at her, right? But a small child doesn't realize that there's not a person in there. And, like, they actually have shown that small children think that Alexa's a real person. So I think that's an interesting example of this modeling.
I just tried to explain this to my 3-year-old, and he was very confused.
I just wanted to comment on your question. I think that why he didn't name the creature was because if he were to name the creature, then that would mean that he's actually acknowledging, similarly to what you said, he's actually acknowledging that he did create this ugly creature and that he's responsible for creating said creature. So it's like a sense of guilt into it.
That's a great question.
So I had a question, or more of like a question and comment, about whether or not Victor was like godly or like a devil. I saw him mainly as neither, and just a man who was like trying to search for his meaning in life via creating the creature. You can also see it with his relationship with Elizabeth, and I thought that was a really big theme throughout the novel, because you also see it with Frankenstein and his hope and want to have the bride or mate. And I thought that I liked the connection between Mr. Weyland-Yutani from Aliens. However, I thought that the difference was Weyland was a lot more, like how you guys said, prideful over his creation. However, Victor, he didn't really want to take any responsibility or pride over it, like how you said he was very irresponsible with it. So I can't see the God complex, or Victor having a God complex after, of course, he made the monster, because he was really trying to get away from it. I thought he felt kind of like shameful about it to a point.
I think we have time for one more question back here, and then I'm going to let our panelists just give a last kind of parting word before we have a special concluding activity.
Hi, my name is Camille. My question is, if Frankenstein actually cared for the creature and did what he was supposed to do you think that society would have accepted the creature?
That's a terrific question. And I mean, the way that I would answer it, that Victor has a responsibility to try to do that anyway. Now, whether or not, or to what extent the creature would have been accepted, that's another story. But it was Victor's responsibility to take care of it, and he didn't. And that's one of the that's the worst thing that he does, is that he abandons his own creation. And that's but that's a great question.
Any responses from the rest of the panelists?
I mean, the way that everyone treats the creature suggests that it wouldn't have worked. It suggests that that everyone responded with such visceral horror that it was hopeless. But I agree that in creating the creature, he had the responsibility to try and to use, I mean, his wealth and social position to try to do that.
I think it also speaks to the legal or kind of governmental regulations of science. So if you're creating a new technology and it happens to be used as a weapon and kills billions of people, should you be held responsible for that?
That's a great question. Okay, at this point, I'm just going to give our panelists a chance to just make a kind of closing, go read this, think more about this. I would have talked about this had we had more time. So why don't we start with Dan and come back this direction?
I'm not sure if so first of all, just thank all of you for coming, and I would like to just hear more of what you guys have to say about the book, / I want to read books with you guys. And the one kind of thing that intrigued me and that I still am not sure what to think about is the idea, should Dr. Frankenstein have created the bride, the partner for the creature? I think there's tangled things, yes and no, and I just think that that's a fun little aspect to think about.
I would just encourage you to read more science fiction. I think you can learn a lot of science in a fun, easily engaging way, like watching Marvel movies as well. So I think I skipped over all the biomedical engineering stuff that I had written down for today. I hope you don't mind. Thank you for indulging me. But I would leave you with one more reference. I think of Iron Man. He's really my favorite superhero. He's the mechanical engineer, right? He's this optimistic innovator who's using technology that he creates to really save humanity. So to me, that's like what we should be striving for. And then on the flip side, there's Thanos, right? Thanos is using technology to destroy humans. So that's the, counter argument, like, he's sort of overreaching, like Wayland and, maybe like Dr. Frankenstein, and has really tragic consequences. So those are two more references.
As a final comment, I'm still thinking about the last student's question about the responsibility of Victor to his creature, and I'm thinking the importance in the novel of the prejudice theme. That is really a central theme. That the whole DeLacy plot has to do with they're victimized because they're helping a Muslim in a context where there's so much prejudice against Muslims, and there are other instances in the novel. So that suggests that that is something that Mary Shelley's working out in terms of people's responses. That they look at the monster and they see something totally other than they are. But at the same time, the Christians look at the Muslims and they see something totally other. So it's something similar. Thank you.
Great. Well, please join me in thanking our panelists one more time. So at this point, I'm going to ask Dr. Sabrina Collins to come up to say a quick word. I'm actually going to ask our panelists to stay here. Maybe you can stand up with us, and then we'll let Dr. Collins take it away. Let me give you a microphone. There you go. It's on now.
Ms. Lewis, could you come down? So yes. So Ms. Lewis actually gave me the absolute honor to have an opportunity to read your essays. Yes, I did. I read your essays, and it was very difficult to narrow down 10 of them. Some of the themes that resonated through, you guys talked a lot about bullying, and I can see how you can make those kinds of connections. A few of you also talked about the fact that the creature didn't have a name and how that's important for identity and those kinds of things. And so what we wanted to do, so we have identified, narrowed it down to 10 students. So we have 10 backpacks here with a flash drive as well, okay? And so when we call your name, could you come down? So we have Kamaria Perkins. So Maya Mwangi. Tami Tayo. Oyelande. We have Jayla Bundy. Cameron Wilson.
Where's Cameron? Cameron? Oh, she's right there. Cameron Wilson?
Dawn Fields. Taylor Johnson. Erica Nelson. Jaden Duvall. And finally, Justin Wynn. Okay. And so what we did, we narrowed, from the top 10, we narrowed down the top 5 who will receive an opportunity to participate in a summer camp here at Lawrence Tech. Okay, you're a summer camp of choice. So, Kamaria Perkins, Maya, Tamatayo, Jayla, and Cameron. Those are the 5. I don't know if you want to say anything.
Thank you on behalf of University High School, and these are all our students that are in the Advanced Placement Literature class. So they're getting their proper preparation to become a college or university student. So thank you for allowing us to have this opportunity. This was a great chance for them to get to actually experience a college environment. So what you guys shared was amazing, and you're welcome to come to the classroom anytime and read with us. So thank you again.
Well, this concludes our afternoon event. I want to thank all of you for attending. And again, thanks to Dr. Collins and the STEM Center for sponsoring this event. Please do follow us. We actually do have a Twitter feed. We're at Human Tech LTU. There's like 2 tweets, but there will be more. And we're going to have events in this series every month during the school year. So do keep in touch with us, and we hope to see you again. Thank you all very much.